tried to teach you two important Hebrew words, Baruch haba, which means welcome the one who is coming. In other words, you're welcome. And I think the city of Jerusalem is a very appropriate place to talk about the language that was spoken here 2,000 years ago, because behind us you can see the walls of the old Jerusalem, the city that was fortified by King David, and indeed you can see the David Tower. You see that corner where you see very tower,
sure,
guard sort of. And it's unbelievable that throughout the generations, Jewish people prayed to be back in Jerusalem, particularly after the destruction of the Second Temple, 70 AD. And in every corner of the world, wherever a Jew lived, he would say, if I shall forget Jerusalem, I will lose my right arm.
And I'm thoroughly delighted to be back again, especially to see you again, Elli, because not only do I want an understanding of what's happening politically and economically, but for me to really be of real service and support to Israel and its ideals, I have to see what's happening at the people level as well.
You couldn't have said it better, Joe. We need friends like you, not only in Washington, but on people-to-people basis. We want the American people to understand us as people, not just through the headlines, not through just occasional terrorist acts, but how we live, what motivates us, and particularly, why do we choose to live in this country? Because after all, we came here by choice.
One of the things that we've got to focus on as a country, the United States of America, is an energy policy that makes sense for us.
If America is strong, it doesn't obviously have to kowtow to the petropolitics of the Mideast. The thing that we have here is an amalgamation of the friends of Israel, of the Jewish community, and the independent oil and gas producers. The Jewish community in the Northeast or across the United States doesn't really understand the oil and gas industry. In fact, if we may, and if I can borrow David Bar-Ilan's phrase, one of the jobs that we're trying to do is to make oil kosher.
We in 1976, I believe, shot ourselves in the foot by coming up with a tax preference. At that time, we took away the incentives for people to risk money in drilling for oil and gas, and I think depleted or at least decreased what we could have had as domestic oil reserves. Now, I'd like what President Reagan did, because since he took over, we've been storing a lot of oil in the salt domes off of Louisiana, and maybe someone else can comment on that. I think one of the problems we had under Carter is that we didn't have enough oil stored away, and I think now we're up to some 400 million barrels. But that's not enough. That's kind of an intermediary step. What we need is an energy policy that looks to the future and says, where do we want to be as a country? Do we want to think about being on those gas lines again? Obviously not. If we don't, what do we do from a macro point of view, including incentives in the oil and gas industry and, sure, other alternative sources as well, so that that does not happen again? Malcolm, it's good to be here in Israel with you. I was here 18 months ago on not a trip dealing with my responsibilities now as a congressman, but as a citizen here to see what I can do in some small way to help Israel deal with its strategic plan for the future. The theme of a talk that I gave at that time in the Knesset building to the ministers was that military security for Israel is an illusion without economic security. And as a certified public accountant, I wanted to see what I can do to help with a strategic plan to stabilize the economy. You know, the interesting thing, now that I'm in Congress, I can give the same speech in Congress because we have to be concerned with our own economic security to be strong for the rest of the world. But this trip, I think, is just fabulous. The 7 days we're going to be spending with you and with the CSA, and being here at the Yad Vashem, I guess, is a good place to focus on the importance of Israel to the world, not only to the Jewish community in the United States or where I am in Westchester County, but to the fact that a very important part of Israel is the fact that we have here a memorial of man's inhumanity to man, at least here at the Yad Vashem, that in history there were times that we had to reflect on how bad a man can be to man.
I think you're quite right that this is a fitting starting point. I think to understand Israel, to understand the commitment of Jews around the world and of non-Jews who understand what happened 40 years ago, the silence of the world in the face of the destruction of 6 million Jews and millions of others, seeing the depths of depravity to which human beings could sink in their hatred of others. I think understanding the pledge that every Jew takes in one way or another of never again, never allowing what happened 40 years ago to happen again to any people. And Yad Vashem stands as a memorial not only to the 6 million Jews who died, but as a constant reminder to all people and as a living reminder. And when one goes through there, one can relate to it and see himself or his own family, God forbid, going through the same thing.
The green dots mark forced labor camps. The primary function of the forced labor camp is heavy-duty labor, road building, laying of railway tracks, mining, and so on. People no longer fit for work would either be left behind or shot, jettisoned somehow or another. The yellow dots mark concentration camps. The prime purpose of the concentration camp is the German economic effort. It's an excellent source of cheap labor, and that cheap labor was well used. Once again, people no longer fit for labor are either exterminated at the local facility or shipped out for extermination.
Rabbi Fogel, again, thank you for taking the time to show us the importance of Yad Vashem, certainly not just to Israel, but to the rest of the world. It's a monument that one has to see to understand what really happened there in World War II, the Holocaust. And the one thing I'd like for you to repeat at this point, so that we can have it on our film, is the meaning of the word Yad Vashem when we toured that plaza.
Right. Yad Vashem means a memorial and a name. It's not only for the past, but it's for the future as well. We memorialize the past, but in order to sustain the name, we require that the future know it as well. Our future is dependent on the past that we've gone through. And one of the messages that Yad Vashem is trying to perpetuate is that the potential dangers in hate are so great that a thing like this should never be allowed to happen again. That is something that we have to be on watch against all the time.
Israel, and more particularly Teddy Kollek in Jerusalem, is the custodian of the birthplace of the three major religions of the world: Judaism, Christianity, and Muslim, the Muslim religion. And I just read in the New York Times before I got on the plane, Teddy Kollek had the front page of the New York, the magazine section, and I was happy to read that, the job that he's done representing everybody, so that he truly is a custodian, not just for the Jews in Jerusalem, but for the Arabs and the Muslims and the Christians. And I think that that's something that the rest of the world has to know. Are you dependent at all on the state of Israel's budget to supplement
You see, we are living under a colonial government. The law is still the same as was in colonial times, the municipal law. The British instituted in 1934 a municipal code which was based on an Indian municipal code that they had in the empire and that they introduced in India around the turn of the century. And under this, practically everything is dependent on the government, and we have very little powers of our own. And that's bad, not because the government is necessarily stupid, but because I feel that people in cities have more touch of what people need. And I hope that eventually this will change, because it cannot continue under these circumstances.
Do you have your own taxing power
we have a
here?
certain amount of taxing of our own, but we get some subsidies from government for services that we have taken over from the government. They're really government services. Under the law, education public health, and social welfare are government services. Now, they have handed this over to all the cities, not only to Jerusalem, to administer, and undertaken to support it to an agreed percentage of an agreed program. And they just don't carry out their promises.
So the austerity program will impact Jerusalem quite heavily because of the...
Before it even started, the government has already stopped paying. Every one of these ministries owes major amounts of money, and we are in a quandary of how to continue it all. In a very bad shape that way.
We're very fortunate today to have for lunch two good friends. One, our guest, Congressman Joseph DioGuardi, and my old friend, Dr. Moshe Mandelbaum, the governor of the Bank of Israel. I suggest that Joe and Dr. Mandelbaum will discuss some of the current issues of the economy in Israel and in the United States. Joe, would you please open?
Thank you, Elli, very much. Dr. Mandelbaum, before we begin, I have to say a few words about Elli because he's now my man in Israel. We met on my last trip here to Israel. On the tour at that point, we went to the Weitzman, and I found out that Yeda is the commercial arm of the Weitzman. I guess you might say it that way, and Elli is the chief operating officer of that arm. And we became very much interested in our ideas, mutual ideas, for economic self-sufficiency for Israel. In his way, Elli is doing a lot because of the way that Yeda licenses what is researched and developed by the Weitzman, and that, to me, is probably the best way for Israel to bring outside currency here into the country. You know, when I was here, I came here with a strategic plan for Israel's economy, and the theme of that plan was that Israel's Fort Knox was not gold, was not oil, it was brain power. You have 7,000 PhDs here, many of them in the Weitzman, in Galram, Raphael, the government research arms for the military. And I think it's important for us to understand better how to commercially exploit that. And that's why Elli and I became such good friends, because he was doing what I was thinking about. But now I want to work with him to see how we can do it even better, because Israel has to get hard currency here fast to create jobs for these scientists so they don't leave and go to my country. We would like them there, but I think Israel needs them more than Silicon Valley in California.
Currently, we are in the process of licensing several major drug inventions, which will take probably years before they can cure human misery. But we are very optimistic that with this we'll be able to help establish in Israel more sophisticated and more international-oriented pharmaceutical industry and probably other type of industries.
And how do you think I can help on that?
Well, I believe that the U.S. market is probably the largest market for any type of a science-based product, and I want to thank you for voting and joining the American approval for the free trade area. I think that was a very important step
for Israel and the United States
to enable the free importation of Israeli goods into the American market, and I look forward to work with American companies, and knowing that you're in Congress, you will put their fears at bay, and we will not have the difficult initial resistance that we currently might experience from time to time when we discuss with American companies' investments in Israel.
I'd like to know more about the Bank of Israel and your views on my role.
Yes, first of all, I'm very delighted to meet with you today. I know how much you do for this country, and our duty as a Bank of Israel is to make the best utilization of the aid that we get, the money that has been given to Israel. And in fact, I believe that Israel has a very good prospect for the future once we develop the science-based industry, so to bring more academic people into the industrial field and to make use of the breakthrough of technology that we had in the defense and to apply it to civil uses. Perhaps this is the most or the best what we can do And the Bank of Israel is quite involved in promoting the exports of science-based industries, because we believe that the future of Israel lies in these areas. Now, we believe in this as a central bank that what we have to do is to decrease the role of the government expenditures in the economy. You can hear it in many countries in the world. We know how much it's difficult, even in the US, to cut government expenditures. But we were very happy that the government decided about 6 weeks ago to implement a comprehensive economic plan to reduce the government expenditures, to reduce the deficit of the government expenditures. And in July, for the first time since, I think, since 6 or 7 years, that we had a surplus in the budget, not a deficit in the budget. And I hope that the government will continue in this economic policy, namely expenditure discipline, which is a key of success to the whole economic plan. According to this, to the economic plan, the people of Israel had to reduce their standard of living. And the economic plan calls for a reduction in standard of living of about 10% this year, 1985, compared to 1984. We see a positive response of the people to the plan, in spite of the hardship. People will be fired and are already fired from the public sector. But I believe that very soon they will find job opportunities in the business sector.
I think very few people in our country understand the severity of the problem. And Elli, I relate it this way. Our budget is going to be something like $950 billion, almost $1 trillion this year. Your budget is only $24 billion. You can almost put that in our hip pocket. It's a lot of money, but relative to ours. Now, when you look at it, what most people don't know, and this is what I have to educate more of our congressmen on, and the people in my district, is that 2/3 of that budget is uncontrollable. You have about $11 billion on servicing debt, and you have another $7 billion or so on your defense. So that leaves $6 billion or less on all of these social programs. So you're cutting into the bone, so to speak, on what affects the people. So the people, in doing what you just said, have made a very strong commitment. And I think it was that commitment that enabled us to give the $4.5 billion in aid this year, because we wanted a partnership, and we have it. Let's hope that we can work together so we can get Israel back on its feet internally.
Well, that's a point. It's very hard to the people. The people of Israel in general are working quite hard. You know, people are going to reserves 40 to 60 days a year till age of 55 or 50. And every young couple here have a very quite strain on how to develop the future, how to build a house, how to build a home. But still, the people of Israel are determined to take all this hardship, because we all believe that in about 3 or 4 years, the whole structure of our balance of payment, of the economic performance of Israel will change. Only today I got some details about the exports of July and the imports of July. For the first time, the deficit was only about $30 million a month, which is a record of closing the almost balance. It's
You're doing much better than we are. Ours keeps expanding. It would seem to me that Japan should be a natural partner for Israel. I've always felt that a country like Israel, with its brain power, can literally be the licenser to the world. Now, I know that that Israel would like to have as much manufacturing here as possible, and I think ultimately that's a good goal. But I think right now, while people think that this is not maybe the best place to put money in bricks and mortar because of what they read, and I think it's more of a perception than a reality, they think that the bombs are dropping all around here, that Israel might do well in working out arrangements with countries like Japan that don't put as much of its GNP back into research and development as Israel does, in order to kind of share the rewards overall. We know that Japan manufactures very well, distributes very well, and maybe Israel should initially provide the brain power, the ideas to come up with goods that can be exploited in the markets that are already being served by Japan, and thereby bringing some immediate dollars to Israel. Because one of the big problems I see right now is that you have kind of a brain drain, and I would hate to see more scientists leave this great country, even to come to my own, because I think they're needed here more than they're needed in Silicon Valley. But to the extent that you don't bring in the money that creates the jobs to accelerate the research that will be done and the development that will be done from that research by these 7,000 or so PhDs, you have the problem of maybe losing this talent to another country. So while I'd like to see a long-range plan where Israel not only does the research and perfects the technology and then maybe manufactures the goods, I think we have to deal in reality and in practical terms that we have to maybe license some of those ideas right away without tying it into the manufacturing in order to bring hard currency here to keep the scientists working and employed in Israel. And I'm a very strong supporter of Israel, a very strong supporter of the Soviet Jewry problem, and I've made my points known very directly on television and in the media about my support for your great country here. Very well. And that's why I'm here, for 1 week to see what I can do to help Israel become more strong. I am a certified public accountant. I don't know if they understand English, do they? Ja, some.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch vielleicht?
Ich spreche Deutsch ein bisschen. Ich studiere Deutsch in der Hochschule, aber ich vergesse die Wortschatz. Ich bin ein Italienischer. Meine Leute geboren ins Italien. Un poco. But I am a certified public accountant, and I decided to run for Congress. Never had been in politics before. And to show you how great my country was, I was elected now. I'm in Congress. And great in the sense that almost anybody could run, and if they make that case to the public. And the case I made was that I wanted to bring fiscal responsibility to my government, because I realized that if our economy was not strong, then how could we be strong for the rest of the world? And we have to balance our books. Well, I'm bringing the same message here to Israel, that military security for Israel is an illusion without economic security. So I'm hoping to do what I can to make Israel's economy strong by helping it plan for the future. And while we have to give you aid, but I want to see Israel help itself. I believe in what the great philosopher Maimonides said. Maimonides said the highest level of giving is not to give a man a fish, but to teach him how to fish. So we have to, I think, in our way, to help Israel help itself by making the economy strong. And that's why I'm here for a week, to see what I can do so that Israel never becomes a pawn for anybody's system, including our own. Because this year you have an administration that supports Israel. What happens in 8 years if you don't? All right?
Appreciate that.
So that's what I'm trying to do. There are only, by the way, 2 CPAs in Congress in my country, and I'm one of them. So, Joe DioGuardi. Well, we're here in front of the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. And I think it's important to say a few words here at the hospital among the many other places we'll be visiting today. I've seen the good work that the Jewish women have done in Westchester County and in New York in our country, and it's nice to see that that tradition is not one that's just in the United States, but here in Jerusalem as well. I'll be touring the hospital with the people who are in charge and with the people from the Council for Secure America and the Jewish Community Relations Council. I spent, as a volunteer, many of my hours before running for Congress in the healthcare community, and it's one that's very important to me as a congressman. The whole question of healthcare in our county is one that we have to do better planning for, and obviously the key is to get the costs of healthcare down as we improve the quality of health care. I guess there's no greater activity in the community than the health of the people that are in that community, and I'm going to be very anxious to see how the Hadassah Hospital is addressing the problems that they have here in Jerusalem.
I want you to be able to visit me next time with your wife and children, to meet my children, so we have this ongoing relationship that creates this feeling that Israel is a secure place to come and visit, go out at night to the beach and so forth.
Well, you know, having this little vignette here is important just for my wife, because now she'll see that there are no bombs bursting. I mean, every time you pick up a paper...
We don't need these walls anymore to protect us.
But every time you pick up a paper, there's something going wrong in Israel,
Right.
but it's not here.
Right.
And the other thing I have to say is how true it is, what you said about the sacrifices. And I want the people to know just about your situation. Here you're educated in the United States.
Right.
You've got an MBA from the Wharton School
Correct.
of Finance, and you could literally make easily 75 or 100,000, and yet
should say so.
your take-home pay here, I think you told me, was $600 a month.
That's correct.
Now, in spite of the fact that there are some social benefits you have, that's still very little money to live on, and it's a credit to you and to Israel that there are people like you willing to fight for a cause that we all know is worthy, and I hope in my own way to turn on more people to help, because it's not a battle that Israel can win alone. But Israel is alone in this part of the world and is our only friend here, and that's why we must be behind it every day.
Well, this is exactly how you put it to the Minister of Science and Development, Gideon Pad, when you said it's better to teach a man how to fish than give him a fish for lunch.
Right.
And we hope to evolve out of this economics crisis and develop the Israeli economy in such a way that it will be a very attractive place that people can earn good money, make profits, have the American dream come true, that you can really make out of an idea millions of dollars, export, produce it here, employ people, and have this open economy, open society that people from all over the world can enjoy Israel as a place of tourism, place of work, place of science, place of art, and it just, in the old world, we were the center of the cultural Western world.
And I'm delighted to see that it's happening right in front of our eyes, that there is great hope, great potential here. And Elli, I just want to shake your hand again for being my man in Israel. You've done a lot for me personally in the last 18 months since I've been here.
I really enjoy having Joe with me here, and I hope that he will come frequently and that his duties in Washington would not keep him too long away from here.
I will come back again with my family this time.
Promise is a promise.
Okay.
Now we're going to Wailing Wall.